Men, bros, dudes, fellas, guys, muchachos. We drink beers. We hate wine. We watch sports. We hate chick flicks. We eat steaks. We're tough. We hate talking about our feelings. We do hard work. We endanger our lives. We let our skin get destroyed. We hate moisturizer. We talk with our fists. We're leaders. We stay awake crying some nights and don't know why. We like, I don't know, boobies, I guess, but we're men. Stop asking questions. When I was growing up as a young lad in the north of England, I didn't really feel like I belonged. I realized from a young age that I wasn't like the other boys around me or even the men, and when I was 11 years old, I entered high school, and in my case, it was an all-boys school. The veil of childhood was gradually being lifted, and I found myself being surrounded by teenage boys from different backgrounds, but almost all of them had one thing in common. They were all desperate to prove their masculinity, whether that was through words, behavior, or actions, especially violence. Fights were fairly commonplace, and as is often the case, they came about due to a belief that words weren't sufficient enough to solve disputes, a mentality that a lot of men carry with them into their adulthood. Many of them didn't place much value on education or other scholarly pursuits. They cared about sports, especially rugby and football, or soccer, if you want to be difficult. And they weren't really into talking, at least not about anything other than what was happening right there and then. For a lack of a better word, they were normies in this context. I'm not going to fault people for being this way. If it's what someone is comfortable with, then so be it. But it wasn't me, and a lot of my peers became very aware of that in time and ultimately made me a target for being different. Over time, I made some good friends who were similar to me, and we found solace in each other's company. We enjoyed talking, avoided violence, shared nerdy interests, and we didn't have to worry about being judged. Like many other British male friendships, though, we also threw some absolutely vicious insults at each other, which, if you know anything about the Brits, that is the sign of a true friend. You can say the most awful things to each other, but you know they still care. The interesting thing, though, was that on occasion I'd get to know one of the normies a bit better and learn that we actually had a lot in common. They enjoyed conversations and interests that they didn't tell their friends about and were more emotionally in touch than I'd assumed. It was a pleasant surprise, and it was nice to have my expectations proven wrong. When these boys found themselves around the normies, though, they'd switch back to being just like them once again, and I couldn't help but wonder if they felt happier around me and my friends or around them. Either way, it was clear that there was a part of them that they had to take care not to show the other boys, more likely out of fear of rejection or ridicule. Seeing this made me wonder how many other cis-hetero males are out there seemingly trapped by their need to cater to other men's expectations, and how do they feel about it? To an extent, we all play social chameleons at some point in our life. More often than not, it's out of a need to find friends or insecurity, but that insecurity can be caused by a society which demands people, in this case men, to stay within their box. I've done this plenty of times throughout my life, fearing what people may think of me should I show that side of me that isn't considered manly. What I want to look at, though, is why men are so reluctant to explore outside of the border of masculinity. Why is it that certain cultures, namely those in the West, place so much value on being persistently stoic, and shun those who embrace emotional ranges that every human being is entitled to? How are men damaging themselves and those around them in the long run by holding on to these values, and what they lose by doing so? I also want to look into male relationships, both romantic and platonic, and why some men are seemingly incapable of communicating how they feel about those closest to them, especially in the case of cis friends. So let's talk about men, and why they are trapped in the prison of masculinity. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to talk about this video's sponsor, Surfshark VPN.
I'm sure you know all about VPNs at this point, but to put it simply, if you want to remain safe online and open up parts of the web that are unavailable to you in your country as well, then you need one. You would be amazed at how easy it is for people to track you and gather your data just while doing regular stuff like browsing the web or looking through social media sites. You and your IP address are visible everywhere you go, and as you can imagine, that can be a problem. Even your own ISP is tracking every site that you visit and every download, even if you're using incognito mode in your browser. Surfshark offers peace of mind and protection whenever you're online across all your devices. Not only does it mask your activity, but your location too, something which you've probably noticed is becoming more common these days. It ensures that you have full control of your data and keeps it out of the wrong hands, so if you happen to accidentally land on the wrong page, you don't end up in a heap of trouble. One of my favorite features of Surfshark though is how it opens up the web for you, especially with streaming sites. So if I wanted to catch up on some British TV shows like The Lord of Tiddlewitch, Soggy Bottoms, or even The Turkey Mystery, a daily 2-hour drama where Gordon Ramsay goes undercover as Jamie Oliver to take down the underground turkey Twizzler industry. These shows don't exist, but you believe they did. However, if they were real, you better believe that Surfshark would allow you to access them no matter where you are in the world. Their apps are easy to use, it's available on Windows, Mac, iPhone, Android and more. They have servers around the world, their speeds are excellent, and you can use it on public Wi-Fi too, so you can be protected no matter where you go. So here's the deal, Surfshark are offering you 83% off a 2-year subscription plus an extra 3 months for free if you sign up using the promo code Salari, or you can click on the link in the description as well. And as someone who's been using them for a good while now, I can assure you that that is a bargain. So sign up to surf a safe and open web today. As you are probably well aware, in the UK football is insanely popular, especially among men of all ages. By the way, when I say football, I mean soccer. I know the majority of my audience is from the US, but the rest of the world calls it football, so get used to it. From a young age, boys are basically taught that if you are born male, you have to love football because it's just what you do. It's a sport by men that's largely played by men and the thing that unites men by giving them something to bond over, whether it's to fill the silence when you're around friends or strangers or to have something to celebrate, especially when there's any major tournaments going on such as the World Cup or the UEFA European Championship among many others. I can't fault sports for uniting people. It can be a genuinely wonderful thing to have something that everyone can get behind, and as for it being something to talk about, well, I guess it beats small talk about the weather, something which in general bores the hell out of me. Ooh, it's a hot one today. Yeah, it's July, Anthony. What were you expecting, a blizzard? However, despite being exposed to football all of my life and being forced to play it throughout high school, I've just never been able to get into it. If you like it, then I respect that, but personally, I find it hard to enjoy watching 90 minutes of middle-aged multimillionaires not scoring goals. In fact, the only sports that I've ever really gotten into has been esports, mostly fighting games like Street Fighter, but I used to watch competitive Dota 2 religiously, and through that I think I finally gained some understanding of what it means to care about sports and follow a team. What I always found interesting though is that even though a lot of people I saw who were into football seemed to fit the archetype of a man, the kind who in general weren't privy to being expressive in their everyday life, it was through their love of football where they found an opportunity to express themselves. They would show joy and elation in victory, grief and despair in loss, or even anxiety in those uncertain moments where a match could go either way. The funny thing is, some of these men would sooner openly cry at the results of a football match than they would over something far more personal, like losing their job, breaking up with their partner, or even something as awful as being diagnosed with a serious illness or losing a loved one. Eventually, I realized that football is a safe space for men. It's like therapy, in a way. It's a place where they can explore and release their emotions in a context where it's deemed acceptable. They're around others who share these emotions, some stronger than others, and as such, they feel like they're allowed to express themselves in a way that their everyday life seemingly doesn't permit. You remember the movie Fight Club? It's kind of like when the narrator visits those support groups and learns to let go because they're all so open with each other. I think that it is great that some men get this chance to let out these emotions and share them with other people, to have company among those who understand how they're feeling, but it sucks that they don't really have many opportunities to do the same outside of those 90-minute windows. It's a beautiful irony, really, that this sport, which is a symbol of masculinity to many around the world, allows for such a huge outpouring of emotions, something which is considered antithetical to masculinity. For those such as myself who grew up in the UK not liking football, it often meant having your masculinity questioned by those who do, or feeling like a pariah. It meant that when meeting other males, there was a larger barrier to climb when it came to bonding with them, something which, when I was younger, I was personally not very good at since I didn't know the patois. It also probably didn't help that I grew up in the north of England with words like patois in my vernacular. And vernacular. Am I just a snob? If you can't talk about football, then how do you connect with a man when they're closed off to talking about most other things? Men are supposed to be reserved, even towards the ones closest to them, so asking about someone's interests can be difficult, made all the more harder when you consider that the kind of pursuits that men are supposed to enjoy are shockingly prohibitive due to so many of them being considered not manly, but we'll talk about this later. It was an alienating experience for me, but on the other hand, the desire to conform to masculine ideals means that a lot of men are not only limiting their ability to connect to other people, but potentially denying themselves of the things that they might actually really like. In general, a lot of men tend to go out of their way to avoid anything that's feminine coded, which in short means anything that women would like to do or be interested in, whether it's something as simple as using skincare products or avoiding certain colours which are associated with femininity, such as pinks and purples. If you were to ask a man why they would avoid something such as a simple colour, they'd probably answer with something just like, "It's not what men do." I occasionally enjoy wearing nail polish because, well, I think it looks nice. But on the past few occasions, I've been asked by men, both strangers and friends, "Why are you wearing that?" And even though I can understand why they'd ask such a question, I still struggle to comprehend why it's even been asked in the first place, because it's just putting colours on your nails. It doesn't mean anything, and it's only done because a person thinks that it looks nice. It's really not complicated, but even the most innocuous of things have somehow made it into the rule book of masculinity without any real explanation as to why. And the only justification being that women do these things, so men shouldn't, even though, once again, it's something that they might like. This can also include things that are good for men too. As I said a moment ago, skincare is something that a lot of men tend to avoid entirely, other than maybe washing their face with soap and water, or applying a balm after clean shaving. In recent years, I've gotten more into skincare, and honestly, I wish that I had gotten into it so much sooner. My skin looks so much better than it did before, it feels healthier, and in general, I feel more confident because of that, a trait which is considered desirable for men and others. I even have my own routine. Here it is.
So this is a very simple routine that uses very few products, but you can start out cheap, it doesn't really matter, but I have my own thing at this point, so I want to show you what I do in this one. First of all, we start out with some Paula's Choice Advanced Replenishing Toner. So make sure you have a couple of makeup pads handy for this one. It does make it a lot easier rather than just slathering it on with your skin. And you just open a bottle, put a little bit on there, and once you do that, just wipe it on your face. Simple as that. Get under your eyes, around your nose, anywhere where you got some pores that you might want tidying up a little bit. If you have a beard like I do, then sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to get under those areas. I try to just pat it down a bit, just because otherwise, if I really wanted to be thorough, I'd empty the bottle, having to cover all of this stuff, It's thick hair. After that's applied, all you have to do is just wait for it a moment just to dry out a little bit. Wave your face if you want to speed it up a little bit. Then after that comes the exfoliant. I'm gonna put this thing on here. Sometimes I like to put it on because if I get any kind of moisture in my hair, it just makes it start frizzing up. Just make sure that any kind of wisps of hair don't get in the way of things, like you do. Next up is the Paula's Choice 2% BHA liquid exfoliant with salicylic acid. Now, I tend to use this fairly regularly, usually every 2 days when I shower, but there are also occasions where I use Paula's Choice 8% AHA gel exfoliant. If anyone from Paula's Choice watches my videos and you want a sponsorship, call me. Once again, you just get a makeup pad, apply a good amount on there, and once again, just apply it around your face. You don't really have to apply any kind of pressure on here, you're just wanting to wipe it around. Now once you've got that applied, you want it to sit for like 5-10 minutes maybe. Depends how much free time you got really, or how impatient you are, but do leave it on a little bit of time to make sure it does its thing. Once that's done, come back to the bathroom and we'll be applying moisturizer.
If you think beautiful skin is only something you're born with, get wind of sea breeze. Beautiful skin can be.
What we'll be using for this one is a South Korean skincare product that I really like called True Water Deep Moisturizing Cream EX by Thank You Pharma. It is super hard to find this stuff. If anyone knows where I can get it reliably, please let me know, because this stuff, the South Koreans really know what they're doing when it comes to skincare. A nice little bit of it on your fingertips. You can just apply this straight to your skin and that's perfectly fine. Me, what I've started doing recently is I've started adding a couple drops of niacinamide. So, a couple drops, what you do, put it in your palm, and then get the moisturizer, rub it in, and once again, just start applying it to your skin. Very simple. Usually you want to do like concentric circles around your face. Just all those places that get dry, make sure you hit them properly and rub it in good. Also, I don't know if my technique is bad or anything like that, but I don't know. Leave a comment saying I'm bad at this, whatever. And done. Simple as that. See? That's all you need. I mean, mine's 5 steps, you know, but if you want to get into it too, it's simple. Toner, exfoliant, moisturizer. Really nice. Or if you just want to get some moisturizer, that is perfectly fine too. Something is better than nothing.
There are a good amount of men out there who have started to embrace skincare and grooming in general, even though that sometimes means they restrict themselves by only using products which are explicitly coded as male, which is silly, and believe me when I say it ain't the good stuff. But it's a step in the right direction. Skincare is one thing, but convincing straight cis men to wear makeup, forget about it. In the eyes of men, makeup is about as feminine as it gets, and wearing it is a surefire way of making others question your masculinity. Despite its massive range of applications, makeup is something that many people consider to be exclusive to women, and that's no surprise given how it's always been marketed that way. There are some points in history where men wearing makeup was more commonplace, like Elizabethan England or 18th century France, and there are some countries now where men wearing makeup is becoming more normalized, such as in South Korea, but even though despite the fact that more people are starting to shun gender norms, makeup is still largely considered the domain of women. I think it's safe to say that we all like to look nice. Even if you're a guy that spends most of your downtime wearing sweats and leaving your hair a greasy mess, you can't deny that on the occasions where you get to do something like wear a suit, you cannot help but like seeing what's in the mirror. So if something like makeup can help you feel that way, what is stopping you from using it? Why not make your eyes pop a little bit by using some barely there eyeliner, or even some mascara, or some light contouring to accentuate your cheekbones, or even give yourself a more pronounced jawline. I know that some guys go to extremes to try and make theirs look stronger, or believe things on the internet about how pressing your tongue against your mouth palate throughout the entire day will magically fix it. Fellas, you would be amazed what you could do with makeup and what techniques there are to make it look completely natural. In fact, I wear makeup in every video because under these strong lights, my dark under eyes make it look like I've been on a 3-day heroin binge, and I know that you couldn't tell that I'm wearing any. Clothing is another thing where men aren't too adventurous, including the types of clothes that we wear, the styles, fabrics, and fit. Men aren't supposed to wear dresses and skirts, even though anyone who wears them will attest that they are incredibly comfortable and great to wear on a hot day. Pastel colors and certain designs are hard to find, which is a shame because I love a good floral embroidery, and even things like underwear styles are pretty boring. In fact, as a whole, men's fashion is dreadfully boring. I like interesting clothing that stands out a bit, hence this, I guess, and I like getting compliments for it. Hint hint. But my god, is it hard to find anything remotely different in men's clothing shops. Every men's clothing store is basically a copy-paste of the next. Boring pants, boring shirts, boring jackets and coats, boring accessories, dull colors, dull designs, dull. It is a miserable experience. The only place I've been able to find anything interesting is vintage clothing shops and thrift shops, but even then you gotta hope that it's in your size or hope that it's big enough to be taken in. I cannot describe how much I envy the amount of choice women have when it comes to clothing. How they have all these choices to present to the world, to feel good about themselves, to express themselves. Of course, that's not to say that it's perfect for them. Finding the right fit can be incredibly hard where there's so many shapes and sizes. It can almost feel impossible to find pants with pockets, but because men are so closed off to exploring different styles, it's resulted in homogeneous, boring clothing. I have no inclination to wear women's clothing myself. I won't look good in it, but I wish men were a little more open to trying something different. At the very least, we can try and make capes fashionable again. I think that would be sick. Come on, be honest. Even the little things that make life easier are missed out on. Like, I like to carry a messenger bag with me whenever I go out, so I can carry more than just my wallet, keys, and phones. Along with those, I get to carry my sunglasses, some hand sanitizer, a pen, a Swiss Army multi-tool, a notebook, and an umbrella, and I have plenty of space to add more. Yet, for some reason, on multiple occasions throughout my life, other men have made comments on it, calling it a handbag or a purse, using feminine wording as a means of insulting me. Something obviously rooted in sexism, but it's just a bag for carrying stuff. It's bizarre, isn't it? It's certainly much better than carrying your life around in your pockets and a square piece of leather, or worse, one of those shitty Ridge wallets. Well, there goes my chance at a sponsorship, I guess. Some of these cultural norms may be small in the grand scheme of things, and often it's ridiculous that they're a subject that's up for debate. They all come from somewhere, whether that's through cultural norms that have been passed down from generation to generation, or the result of decades of influential marketing funded by powerful groups and to further the interests of capitalism. These norms have also been upheld by people with far more insidious intentions, though, as a means of controlling men, women, and every other gender, in an attempt to perpetuate outdated and restrictive conservative ideals which are becoming increasingly less compatible with the modern world. Nonetheless, they're still influential, and we need to talk about how masculinity is damaging, especially to the men who believe that it's paramount to their identity. So this would normally be the segment where the boost bus goes, but unfortunately due to some technical issues that I experienced while making this video, I've been unable to include it this time. So to make up for it, next video I'm going to be showcasing the work of 3 creators. So if you would like a ride on the boost bus, then please send me one email to salarivideo@gmail.com. Please be sure to include your pronouns, a short bio for yourself and your work, along with any relevant links including socials, websites, etc. And also please be sure to include some high quality samples of your work if you work as something like an artist, for example. I will be able to reply to your emails, but rest assured I do read every single one of them. Sorry for not including it this time, but hopefully the next video will make up for it.
To discuss this matter further, I've invited fellow video essayist and my future best friend, FD Signifier, to share his thoughts on this matter, along with his own personal experiences growing up with masculinity.
One thing that I think is changing, like it's developing, but it's still, very much in its infancy, is men in interrogating the ways in which patriarchy has limited, our humanity and our ability to express ourselves and our ability to respond to the world as, fully actualized human beings. Looking at how men can be objectified in a sense that we're not usually keen to. Like, we think of objectification, we think of, anime boobs and porn or booties and rap videos, etc., which is all definitely forms of objectification. And we sometimes say, there's ways in which men are objectified too. I've seen too often, for my taste, people talk about the objectification of men through a lens of it looks just like how men do women. And that's true, right? Like a Magic Mike, etc. But to me, that's not a really useful way to like engage with issues around patriarchy and masculinity in men, because objectifying men in the same way that women are objectified doesn't have the same consequences. The objectification of women is a problem because when you objectify women, you dehumanize them. When you dehumanize them, then we start getting into mental processes that lead to sexual violence, because you stop seeing a woman as a person and start seeing them as a collection of organs and body parts that you like. You stop seeing their autonomy. But the point I'm trying to get to is when we think about how the performance of masculinity limits boys and young men's sense of actualization, it's not so much about how we're depicted, but how we're viewed, if that makes sense. I don't know if that'll make sense. This is why I'm a video essayist. I'm just gonna tell this story. So for me personally, I'm not a huge guy, but I'm a decent sized guy. I'm almost about 6 feet tall. I'm 300 pounds at this point, which hopefully will not be the case by the time this comes out. And I'm a black man, unambiguously black, meaning that there's no confusion about my ethnic background. And that carries a certain set of meanings and stigmas. Further, I have a parentage and community that, because I have all those features, feels that certain characteristics should also be present, such as being tough, being stoic, being disciplined, etc. So, having a very vivid imagination, which I did as a kid, was not looked highly upon. Being into fantasy was not looked highly upon. So on and so forth. So those parts of me when I was a kid were relatively limited, because my aunts and uncles, especially my aunts, were not keen on that. There's all these narratives around black boys and men who don't have fathers in the home. And I was one of them. I knew my father. I know my father. My father was accessible, but not around. And so because of various stigmas in black, communities, we'll often find communities seeking to replace the father energy and features through by committee. And often for a lot of boys, that becomes the matriarchs of your families. Because you might have a family full of matriarchs. That's just how it is. And that's kind of how it was for me. I had uncles, but most of my uncles weren't as readily accessible as my aunts. So I was raised more by my mom and my aunts than my uncles for most of my life until I got into my teens. So going back to that whole fantasy, nerd, imagination aspect, I had one cousin who was a girl who was a year older than me, year and some change older than me, who we vibed on that. It was great. She was my favorite cousin early on because she was the only person that had the type of imagination that I had, that was into, wizards and shit, right? This is Southside Chicago. This is the 80s and 90s. This is not modern black nerd culture where black nerds are everywhere. This is very much underground, closeted nerd shit. But there was one problem. This one female cousin was very much weaned in the same patriarchal traditions that I was in, which to her meant that she could hit me as hard as she possibly could, and I was supposed to be okay with it. And I was not allowed to cry about it. And when I told the adults around me, hey, cousin such and such is hitting me too hard and I don't want to play with her anymore, I was the problem. And I never, like I talked to her about this as an adult. I've talked to my aunts, sparingly, because, telling your elders about the way they've traumatized you is not always the easy thing to do and doesn't always yield solutions. But it was something that stuck with me because it was like, first off, this cousin was older than me, was bigger than me. But because I had a Y chromosome, we're talking about children, right? We're not talking about like us as teenagers or adults. We're talking about two children. And, without getting into the insane world of trans women in sports and going through a male puberty, etc., I think it's fair and uncontroversial to say that there are really very few physical differences between a 10-year-old boy and a 10-year-old girl. So because of the way I was socialized as a boy, what am I taught? I'm taught to, be gentle to girls. You don't hit girls, right? You don't do that. That's not what boys do. Taught that very clearly as a young man. So like if we're play fighting, whatever, it's open hand pushes, pokes, taps, etc. My cousin is just like peeling back, swinging for the fences on my ass, since we were little kids. And so while she was one of my favorite cousins early on, I dreaded seeing her as I got older because I knew she was going to hit me with every piece of strength that she had if we ever got physical in our play. And here's the wild thing that's I think it's hard for people to fully get. Because I was a boy, nobody protected me. It was okay to expose me to that type of, on that level, mild violence, because boys are expected to be tougher, are expected to be resilient against that type of violence, are expected to not cry. And I recall crying and being chided for crying. I recalled trying to tell adults and being told that I need to toughen up. And I cried once or twice hitting her back and being told that boys don't hit girls. So it's like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? Except for avoidance, right? That becomes the thing. That becomes a coping mechanism, I think, for a lot of boys and young men. It's natural because we're humans, because gender is a social construct, because masculinity is a social construct. It's natural for us to experience a wide variety of human emotions. But men, boys, masculine presenting people are not safely allowed to engage with the vast majority of those emotions. We're only safely allowed to engage with ones that reinforce a specific form of masculinity under patriarchy, which is one that's, prone to violence or stoicism or, logic over emotions and stuff like that. So when young boys and men start to try out, just by maybe not even try out, when we have natural responses to certain stimuli that would be normal for any human, and the world says, no, you can't do that, but you kind of can't stop it, your coping mechanism is often to shut down, to, create distance from you and the opportunity for that emotion, for the stimuli that creates that emotional response. So I avoided my favorite cousin for a while, not because I didn't like my favorite cousin, although I obviously didn't like being hit the way I was hit, but also, I knew enough to know that she wasn't being mean. She just didn't understand that it wasn't okay to hit boys with all her strength, because she came up in the same patriarchal, culture that I did. But because I recognized that there was no way to protect myself effectively, I was either going to be a villain for responding to her violence in kind, or I was going to be a villain for responding to my own victimization in a normal in a normal way, that, you know, the only thing left to do was to just avoid the situation altogether. And so that often sticks with me when we have conversations around masculinity and about the problems that masculine presenting people, men and boys, present. Is, you know, this is a quote you had, is like, it comes from somewhere. You know, it isn't created out of the ether. Those are learned responses, learned behaviors, learned techniques for avoiding conflict and negative emotions, whether it be through explicit avoidance through space, or avoidance through substance misuse, or avoidance through things that develop into mental illness, you know? And that is something I'm experiencing raising two boys myself, you know? I try to raise them differently than how I was raised, in terms of like allowing them to express their emotions without shaming them for certain emotions being present. But then I think, you know, is the world ready for that? Is the world ready for two Black boys who were not weaned in that pressurized reality of, you're only okay with these 4 or 5 emotions as a man? And I may be setting them up for failure and not realizing it. That's kind of the gamble I'm taking.
Compared to masculinity, femininity is a much broader spectrum which allows for expression, whether it's through appearances, interests, expression, and so forth. There are undeniably some awful stigmas towards women who participate in masculine-coded things, including wearing clothing that doesn't highlight their figure, having short hair, playing and enjoying predominantly male sports, not wearing makeup, being outspoken, being sexually adventurous, drinking beer, having body hair, being muscular, playing video games, not smiling. You get it. There's a lot. Like, a ton. Gender roles are dumb, alright? Regardless though, there are arguably far more things that a woman can be versus what a man can be in order to adhere to their gender norms. Now, to be clear, this is not my way of proclaiming that men have it harder than women. That's something which is categorically not true, especially considering that just recently in the US, millions of women have lost a great deal of body autonomy due to a largely male-driven ideology. The simple fact is that if we want men to be better, then we can't simply dismiss them as a lost cause or believe that they're not worth sympathizing with. One of the worst aspects of masculinity is its inherent toxicity, something which has been furiously dismissed and defended by people who wish to uphold the masculine ideals. In recent years, the term toxic masculinity has become a bogeyman of sorts. Some people, mostly men, sometimes women, will hear it and immediately roll their eyes, thinking that it's just one of those terms that gets thrown out by progressives to demonize men for doing things that are completely natural to them and have never been a problem up until recently, ignoring the fact that it's always been a problem. It's easy to think that toxic masculinity is just a term for men misbehaving, but it is so much more than that. Toxicity isn't just something that harms people in the proximity of an individual who is behaving in such a way, it harms the individual themselves, and that's a factor that's constantly overlooked by people who dislike the term. For example, aggression is often considered a valuable trait amongst men. The ability to be tough and show those around you that you are a credible threat should someone choose to challenge you, you are ready to respond with force. If a man were to present themselves to others in such a way, there indeed may be a chance that it will have its intended effect, but in the process, they alienate themselves from those around them. They have established themselves as dangerous, violent, and possibly unstable, leaving themselves in a position where this trait that's supposedly supposed to make men more desirable has caused others to avoid them, thus making them feel afraid and the man alone. All of this is born out of the fear of being seen as weak or less than in the eyes of other people. Weakness begets fear, fear begets anger, anger begets weakness. To compensate for this, there's the idea that men should be self-sufficient and not care about the company of others, but once again, this is something that is harmful to the individual, resulting in lonely men who take pride in deterring people while refusing that any harm has come from their actions, because they believe that this is what men should be. And if that man does happen to believe that by living their life by the rules of masculinity is the key to being a real man, you have to ask whether that man is even capable of recognizing whether it's making them unhappy. If all you've ever known is one way of life and have been taught that all other ways of living are wrong, someone would naturally assume that it should be fulfilling, even if they know that deep down it isn't. That right there is the prison of masculinity. When someone's been behind those bars from the moment that they were born and told that there is nothing good waiting for them on the outside, then why would they leave? The only thing that you could really hope for at that point would be that a man becomes curious enough to venture outside, because even though it might be a prison cell, the door was never locked in the first place. The effects of masculinity and its harm to everyone in its presence isn't exclusive to the kind of people you're thinking of, i.e. the man's man who wears their manliness with pride. It's something internalized by men who are considered more atypical by comparison, including myself. Although gender roles have changed dramatically over the past 30 years or so with the shifting of dynamics in the home and workplace, some men struggle to find comfort in their situations. One extremely common example is the idea of the breadwinner, the person who brings home the most money and is able to provide for their partners and anyone else in their household. Even the most progressive cis-het men who live with a woman partner and aren't the breadwinner will readily admit that they feel guilt about being reliant on another person. Some may even go as far as to say they feel guilty for not being the sole provider, something which was expected of men in the past, but with the increased cost of living and wage stagnation, it has become increasingly uncommon. I will freely admit that I have felt this way on numerous occasions, especially during times of financial hardship where I wish I could have done more, or thought that if I had tried harder then I'd be earning enough money that surprise expenditures wouldn't be a problem. I felt awful for seeing my wife stressed over money, believing that it was my fault that she felt that way. If you see my most recent video on the stresses of YouTube, you'll know that I'm not the breadwinner in my household. Maybe one day I will be, but that is a tall order since YouTube is YouTube. Even though I'm at peace with the fact that I'm not the one with the biggest paycheck at the end of the month, or at least most months, and despite my wife communicating with me that she's comfortable with our situation, it still bugs me every now and then. And that's because of this caveman stuff that is so thoroughly ingrained in the heads of so many men, even the soft ones. It's all because we've grown up in a society that's so afraid to upset the natural order, and it's been reinforced by men and even women with internalized misogyny, especially conservatives who in recent years have been trying to promote old-fashioned gender roles through the trad wife movement, which you may have seen through alt-right memes or videos funded by far-right groups such as Ben Shapiro's sister, Abby Shapiro, who devotes content to talking about the virtues of being a good wife while occasionally, unintentionally, catering to foot fetishists. I mean, I'm not judging you, Abby. We're all on that grind. You may as well make some money from those little piggies. Many traits of masculinity are closely tied to the desire for power, which is arguably what most men crave, whether this is on a smaller level like social situations or something much bigger like financial or political power. The desire for power, though, has historically led to a lot of men to do truly awful things, from attacking another person to destroying the lives of millions through conquest. But as the saying goes, absolute power corrupts absolutely. A statement which will always remain true, and it applies to every man, whether he's the head of a household who wants control over his family, or he's the CEO of a trillion-dollar corporation. Power can only be attained by taking it from other people. If we're to discuss power, though, we unfortunately have to discuss how men choose to acquire it. I'll try to be as sensitive as I can with this stuff, but if any of this is difficult to listen to, then I've provided the timecode below if you wish to skip. I will not be including any imagery. In a country like America, if a man who feels powerless wants power, there is no easier way to do so than by buying a gun. No matter how weak a man might be, possessing a firearm in their hands gives them the ability to end the life of another human being in an instant, and although that's a horrifying thought to most people, there is understandably an allure to those who are desperate for power. The gun is a symbol of power in America. It's a tool meant to be used when your life and your liberty are under threat, and as such you are expected to wield the power of the gun in order to take it back into your own hands. Guns have been dubbed the great equalizer, but I think it's fair to say that at this point in history, that's simply not true, because what we've seen time and time again is that when it comes to gun use, it's not done for defense, it's done to strip innocent people of their power. According to the Rockefeller Institute of Government, since 1966 to 2020, there have been 402 mass shootings in the United States, defined as an incident of targeted violence carried out by one or more shooters at one or more public or populated locations where the victim and/or locations are chosen at random or for symbolic value, and isn't motivated by gang violence or terrorist activities. I wanted to make that abundantly clear just before people try to defer that blame onto other groups. Those shootings have resulted in the deaths of 1,449 people, most commonly taking place at either the workplace or school. A staggering 95.7% of those perpetrators were men. That's 385 men and only 17 women. The common link between male mass shooters being childhood trauma, violence in the home, despair, isolation, self-loathing, and rejection from peers, all of which masculinity has some hand in. All that repression, the insecurity, the inability to express, all of it has very real consequences. And even when it's not directed towards others, it can still end with the man using the same tool that they acquired to gain some power to end their own life, as self-inflicted gunshot wounds are overwhelmingly the most common methodology of suicide in the US at over 58% among males. The pursuit of power is simply not worth it. Masculinity is not worth it. And it's becoming ever more apparent that it's not compatible in a world where how we define gender is becoming blurrier by the day. It's not fair to place the struggles that men face on the shoulders of women or any other gender, because ultimately it's up to us as men to accept change and strive for equality. Men do have some very valid issues that are often obfuscated by those who like to point the finger at the wrong people, kind of like how men's rights activists will blame women for everything. One thing that really saddens me though, on a personal level, is how masculinity has gotten in the way of connecting with other men, including those that I'm friends with. There's been times where I've had to pretend that I'm someone else just to fit in, never quite feeling comfortable. There's been times where I've wanted to learn so much more about someone, but it's not what guys do. And there's been times where I've had a male friend who I couldn't imagine life without, that I'm so glad to have met, that I've gladly given some of my brief time on this earth to without any regrets. And I just want to tell them that I love them, and I hope that they can say the same to me. To acknowledge that we have this platonic, wonderful, and rare thing. So to all of you men out there, the next time you see your friends, the people that mean the most to you, hug your bros, tell them you love them, and I can almost guarantee that they'll say the same back to you, and you'll feel so much better about it, because it's wonderful, and it should be celebrated.
I love you. I'm not even embarrassed to say it.
I'm not embarrassed.
Love you.
I love you. Why don't we say that every day? Why can't we say it more often?
If you want my advice, just drop the act. Yeah, it's easier said than done. Men have been spoon-fed since birth about how they should conduct themselves, what they should wear, what they should eat, how they talk, how they behave, what to avoid, etc. But if you're not comfortable with these rules, then you are absolutely not obligated to abide by them. The paradox of masculinity is that as a man, you're supposed to show that you don't care about things, but all the effort people put into showing the world how much of a man they are is effort. And not only is that hypocritical, it's a potentially harmful waste of your time. So if you really want to prove you don't care what people think, then try new things without fear of judgment. Yes, there is a chance that you will be judged by other men, which is never great, but in the long run, it's better to feel comfortable in your own skin instead of catering to people who would rather you abide by their rules instead of your own. Paint your nails, wear makeup, admire pretty things, talk about your feelings, cry, wear something frilly, drink a fancy drink, do whatever you want, because no one has the right to stop you, and you'll never know if you like something until you try it. Cheers.
Thank you so very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment, all of that stuff. If you want to leave a comment talking about how bad my skincare routine is, by all means, cyberbully me on that one. Leave a comment for this one as well. She's very vain, so she'll appreciate it. I also want to offer a thank you to all of the patrons that help support this channel each and every month. They all donate a little bit each month to keep things going around here, or they donate annually, which you get a nice little discount on if you do so. You can see their names scrolling up here, or here, wherever I decide to when I'm editing. And I would also like to give a special shout out to each of the patrons that donate $5 or more each month. Don't. And that goes out to Ellis Wren, Xingping LL, Joseph Blair, Jonathan Morris, Sean, Rose Jane, Caro Schultz, Nicholas Abumad, Bear, Masons, Bailey Grevling, George Valdez. It's Morbin time. Why do you want me to feel pain like this? Shame on you. Henry the Longshot, Christian Moyer, Catherine Pendell. In a Borat voice, my wife. Nicholas McDonald, Azul Crescent, Rachel J. Stark, Maurice Robert, Candide, Dan McCrary, Daniel Perrone, Anna Marie Hanyasova, Grant B., Jordan Christoph, Rach, Enrique Gutierrez, Mergerger Fashionable, Alina, R. Atoms, Games, Sander Panda, CB Hart, Kevin Korber, Lillian Rohn, Sharfay, Mika Buenadonna, Sparrowwagon, Donna Sato, Marcel Gibson, Sem, not Sam, Thomas Tamacano, Jen Veldine, Tadeo De Oria, Ryan Osterman, King Me, Praise Lord Gilgamesh, Alicia Crawford, Jay, Matthew Torres, Martina, Marius Stubbard, Your Sweet Pea, Catherine, Steve Marr, and Lizzie Peasy. Thank you all so much. As you may have noticed, that list is considerably longer this time around, and that's because I've had a huge outpouring of support since the last video. I am so overwhelmed that so many people would step up to support the channel like this. You're all absolutely wonderful people, both past and present supporters. Thank you so much. It really does help. Thank you. Also, you may remember I threw in a little joke in that video showing how much it costs to increase production value in a video, where I threw in my wish list. Turns out some people didn't take that as a joke, and suddenly things started arriving at my doorstep. Pricey stuff as well, and I don't know how to respond to that other than a absolutely huge thank you for it. You are insanely generous people. I won't go into what was bought, and pretty much all of them said that they didn't want to be mentioned in the video, remain anonymous. Very humble. But yeah, really helpful stuff. I'm speechless. I always have something to say, but I am not insane this one. But you're all beautiful people, and thank you so much. Yeah, I'm bad at responding to generosity, even with my loved ones. So yeah, if it's not, if I'm not crying over it, but yeah, if it's not the big reaction that you expected, I'm really sorry about that. I'm just bad at reacting to stuff. But yeah, thank you for all of your support. It is wonderful. If you do want to support the channel, you can go to patreon.com/Salari. Any amount goes a very, very long way. You also get ad-free early access videos too. Also, if you want to make a one-time donation, you can do so on Coffee. You can see all the details in the description. There's links there. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your support. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And I will see you next time. Okay? Bye-bye. Bye-bye.